In this edition,
if you are borrowing, there is always an analysis that you need to ask your experts to do for you, what is called debt sustainability.
This is a jumbo loan, and we believe it's going to mortgage the future of our beloved Kaduna State by way of taking this $350 million loan.
hello and welcome to Business Weekly. I am Umar Kaltungo. Now, much has been said on Nigeria's aggressive borrowing spree from domestic and international capital markets since 2016, and deservedly so, yes. But since the start of a prolonged global oil price drop in Q2 of 2014, the Nigerian economy has recorded a significant downturn in performance as plummeting government reserves, government revenues, and the resultant forex crisis, which has dragged the economy into its first recession in 25 years. As a result, an expansionary budget of 6.1 trillion naira was adopted in the 2016 fiscal year, and this was just to boost growth and fund more of its capital projects, with a deficit, of course, of about 1.8 trillion naira estimated for that period. No thanks to the resumption of oil militancy in February 2016 and, of course, the underperformance of non-oil revenue relative to projections, actual federal government revenue or retained revenue was 18% short of target, which has widened the deficits. In order to plug these deficits, the federal government embarked on an aggressive borrowing spree, and this has been sustained into 2017. Now, to this end, the Debt Management Office decided to alter the public debt mix by leveraging on relatively underexplored foreign currency borrowing capacity, which is multilateral loans were sought from AFDP to the tune of $646.6 million. In addition to bilateral loans from China, Exim Bank, France AFD, Japan JICA, on and on. Following improvements in domestic investment landscape at the turn of the year, Nigeria returned to the international capital market after a 3-year hiatus, successfully raising about $1.5 billion Eurobond and, of course, the $300 million diaspora bond. On the domestic front, the DMO has continued to, during its monthly bond auctions, take loans as well from Nigerians, including the savings loan that they just introduced, and of course the 100 billion naira Sukuk bond that was handed over to the Ministry of Works, Power and Housing for rehabilitation and construction of about 25 roads across the Federation. Now, the 2017 budget is projecting another record expenditure year with a fiscal deficit estimated at about 2.4 trillion naira. Domestic borrowing accounting for about 53%, which is about 1.3 trillion naira of the total, while foreign borrowing was projected at around 1.1 trillion naira. While the deficit-funded expansionary fiscal policy pursued in 2016 had a positive impact on the growth, as seen in the GDP, since we have kind of exited from recession now by about 0.55%, according to the figures. But according to the DMO, federal government total debt stood at about 10.9 trillion naira as of the end of the year in 2015, but has risen in an astonishing fashion to 48.1% in 15 months to about 16.2 trillion naira in Q1 of this year. Now, the rising debt profile is not surprising given the widening budget deficit and large depreciation in the naira. However, the cost of servicing the mounting obligations took up more than 60% of revenues. You can imagine, over 60% of our oil revenue is now spent on servicing debts. The major argument for increased deficit spending is that the economy is under-leveraged with a debt-to-GDP ratio of about 20%. Well, according to them, but also hard to ignore is the offsetting low non-oil revenue to GDP ratio. Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is just 6%, not compared to other, which is very low compared to other sub-Saharan African countries like South Africa and Kenya, which is 26.2% and 15.4% respectively. Now, indeed, only last week, President Buhari wrote the Senate seeking consent to source for an additional $5.5 billion in foreign loan. Apart from the Finance Ministry's request to float another 2.5 billion euro bond, it goes on and on. However, I sat down with a Harvard-trained economist and former managing director of Unity Bank, Dr. Rislanudeen to discuss this in Abuja. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Sir, recently the National Bureau of Statistics and the Debt Management Office reeled out figures of how much state governments are owing. Some have even borrowed more than their annual allocation from Consolidated Revenue Fund for a year. Some are owing like 50% of that amount. These state governments have more like overborrowed what they are supposed to borrow. Are these state governments really feasible? Can they sustain themselves?
Well, thank you very much. I think this is a topical issue that has been severally discussed exhaustively about the underlying imperative for state to be self-sustained, for states to develop ways and means in which they can sustain themselves beyond the monthly ritual of handout coming from Abuja.
Yes.
And it is also well documented that all the states in this country have one natural resource or the other, have one competitive advantage or the other, whether it is in mining, whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in industries, whether it is in commerce. All the states have those advantages. But unfortunately, because of the so-called Dutch disease, the Dutch people that had this Dutch disease, they were able to cure themselves of the Dutch disease from oil. But Nigerian states, including the state governments, have refused over the years, to get themselves off this so-called Dutch disease, a kind of disease which was coined after the crisis in the Netherlands of a valid currency, where they realized they could not import, they will import everything cheap, and all their industry went down because of the dollar economy, the oil economy. Now, because of the nature of our constitution, which clearly defines how monies drawn from federation account are to be shared, every month state governments seem to be assured that they have some money coming in from Abuja. And for that, they relax their mind. None of them work extremely, except very few, that work very hard, to sustain themselves, to develop ways and means. More than 90% of the states of this country today, if there is no money from federation account, they cannot do anything. They cannot take care of their expenses, they cannot pay salaries, they can talk less of doing any capital project. So now, added to that, in anticipation of money flowing from federation account, most of those states went in on a borrowing spree, tying the repayment to monies coming from federation account. And if that money stops coming, or comes in not in the anticipated manner, especially like, for example, some few months back, like last year, when oil price and the previous oil price went drastically down, states like I think Ocean State, they are collecting next to nothing. And if you are borrowing, there is always an analysis that you need to ask your experts to do for you, what is called the debt sustainability study, which seeks to specifically look at your debt to revenue ratio. If your debt to revenue ratio is high, even if you want to borrow, unless that borrowing is self-sustainable, it's something that will be generating income and it will naturally repay itself, you need to be extra cautious. I think most of our states were not that cautious. They borrowed money to take care of health services, they borrowed money to take care of, to build roads and so on. And at the end of the day, their repayments, since the repayments are tied to monies coming from Federation account. I think there was a time, even early last year, the Ministry of Finance, Federal Ministry of Finance, the Minister of Finance did a press conference in which he announced some form of waivers.
Yes.
Now, waivers a repayment for those states, so that otherwise they don't even have any money to take care of their routine expenses, to pay salaries, to pay pensions, routine expenses. Nobody is even talking about new capital project.
Sir, talking about this debt, it's not only tied to state governments alone. Now, sometime last year, the federal government floated a $1 billion Eurobond. Now they are planning to float another $2.5 billion Eurobond. They have just released money from Sukuk bond to the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing. But my worry, sir, is our budget is at around $38 per barrel of crude oil, and we have been selling way above $40 per barrel throughout the year. We have also hit our production quota of close to 2 million barrels per day. Why must we borrow to fund this budget? Because apparently nothing has been done about capital project, because federal government is even saying that capital budget should be rolled over, or 50 or 60% should be rolled over to 2018 budget. Where is all this money? Is this right? Because it will raise our debt to GDP to about 40% or thereabout. Is this healthy for this economy?
Well, I think it's unhealthy. Majorly because if you are borrowing, you must look at two scenarios, two key scenarios. First, you look at your debt to GDP ratio.
Yes.
If you pass that mark, which is easy to pass, as at now our debt to GDP ratio is about 20%.
Yes.
It has gone up from about 14% 2.5 years back to about 20% because of the borrowings. And you should also look at your debt to revenue ratio. Our debt to revenue ratio, according to the World Bank report, is about 45 to 50%. The import of that means on every $1 we make, 45 cents or thereabout is being used in repaying existing debt, not even the new debt, not the new borrowing, existing borrowings. The 2017 budget was premised on borrowings of the capital expenditure of 2.24 trillion and borrowing of about 2.1 trillion. Meanwhile, the same budget itself made provision for 1.6 trillion to service existing debt. So, in as much as there is always the porria, I had the officials of the Ministry of Finance and Budget talking to the National Assembly early this week about the underlying need to borrow, to implement the capital expenditure so that we can sustain the exit from recession. Yes, you need to spend a lot of money, you need to do a lot of capital projects, to exit recession. But one has to be cautious. And now, for example, if you say the budget itself is only 15% implemented, capital budget is only 15% implemented, whereas ways and means, other recurrent expenses, statutory transfers, personnel expenses, pensions are presumed to be as at when due, then we are just becoming a consumption economy. We are not producing anything, we are not investing anything for the future. That underscores the imperative for investing in capital expenditure. But in doing those investments, we have to be careful about our debt to revenue ratio, because you can only do what you can sustain.
Yes.
And if you cannot sustain it, mark you, from the difficulties that we have had over the last 2.5 years, especially when oil price went down, output went down, and we are virtually making very little money, less than a billion, exported less than 900,000 barrels a day on an oil price that is close to around $30, $28, $30. We were in a crisis. So I thought it was an opportunity for us to learn and begin to run away from an oil economy, to run away from oil dependency. Yes, there has been a lot of effort, a lot of development on agriculture, but more need to be done to ensure that we do no longer rely on oil to sustain our economy. Even the exit that we have had out of recession, if you look at it critically, it was more of divine intervention. Divine intervention in this.
Not our effort.
No, but the point I'm making is there are several, things that happen. Three basic things that happened which favors us. One, we are still an import dependent. We still rely on oil for foreign exchange earnings. That's number one. And we are all import dependent economy. Oil price went up. Output went up. You just mentioned it. Output went up. That means price times output has gone up. Because the price went up because there was some kind of price correction measures, efforts being put up by OPEC, which seeks to cut down on production for all member nations. They even engage countries like Russia to be part of it so that price can be, in the international market, can go up, which was a success. But courtesy of OPEC, they decided in their wisdom, positively for this country, that we should be exempted from that quota.
Output quota, yes.
By exempting us from output quota means that we can produce up to our projected 2.2 million barrels. We are now around 2 million barrels. They wanted us to come back to 1.8. Luckily enough, they extended the waiver. So waiver policy is positive to us. Price is positive to us. Output is positive. Output became positive because there is relative peace in the Niger Delta. Because of those factors, Central Bank was able to generate more income, dollar income, on behalf of the federal government, on behalf of the federation, rather, more dollar income. Because they have more dollar income, Central Bank was able to have the muscles over the last 1 year, to attack speculation, to attack rent seekers, to be able to provide,
which gives reason for stability in the market.
to provide enough foreign exchange to legitimate needs. That helped in sending away legitimate needs of foreign exchange customers away from the black market to the official market. By getting into the interbank market, the import and export market, the NAFEX, which are all windows created by the central bank, has helped in stabilizing the foreign exchange market. In making those small SMEs, big industries, accessing foreign exchange at regulated price from the central bank means that their imported inflation has gone down. It means that what they produce, the so-called cost push inflation, has gone down, which dovetails into consistent over the last 7 months or 6 or 7 months, consistent reduction in inflation rate to about 16.01%. 16.01%. And the second quarter GDP came out because most of the industries are now there's activities, so GDP went up, and we have a positive 0.55% GDP growth rate, which technically gets us exited out of recession.
Is this sustainable?
The only way it can be sustainable is if we walk the talk. The government launched early this year the kind of the blueprint for the government for as far as the economy is concerned, the economic recovery and growth plan,
yes.
which clearly seeks to work towards running away from an oil-dependent economy, which seeks to help in diversifying the economy away from oil. If we continue to talk about diversification without walking the talk, our solution will remain temporary. But if we walk the talk, like the effort being made in agriculture, same effort be made in mining, same effort be made in SME, same effort be made on power reforms, and so on and so forth, then we are out of oil dependency. Then we can say that this success, this improvement is going to be sustainable. But if we don't do that, we just continue to remain at the mercy of the oil price in the international market and hope that there won't be any crisis in the Niger Delta. And that is dangerous for the economy. That is dangerous for even what we are talking about earlier. That is dangerous for sustainability of the state government. Because most of the state governments, unfortunately, have become so lazy.
Yes, heavily
dependent on this oil money, whereas the opportunities for development in mining, in agriculture, in SMEs, and so on and so forth, are there, abound all over the country. So we are on the right course, especially if we implement those policies encapsulated in the economic recovery and growth plan, so that we can exit oil dependency. So long as we continue to project our life around oil, then we remain under the vicious cycle. You know, we continue under this trend. Oil price goes up, we are in money. Oil price goes down, we are in crisis. And I hope this EGRP policy would be religiously implemented.
Thank you so very much for coming to the program, Dr. Rislanudeen.
Yeah, welcome.
That was Dr. Rislanudeen Mohammed, a Harvard-trained economist and former managing director of Unity Bank, talking to us about the rising debt profile, which has become worrisome for Nigerians compared to, because if you look at our revenue to GDP, it's nothing to write home about. But GDP to debt ratio, yeah, is on the high side. We have not yet reached the 40% mark, but we're approaching that. In a related development, last week some concerned citizens of Kaduna State visited the Senate to protest plans by the Kaduna State government to borrow $350 million, which is equivalent to about 122 billion naira from foreign sources. Their grievance is that Kaduna State is second only to Lagos in terms of loans. Now, Lagos is said to be owing well over 1 trillion naira, while Kaduna is owing well over 230 billion naira. The DMO recently released data detailing how much some states are exposed to domestic debt. Several states have borrowed more than 100% of their income from Federation account. Our Senate correspondent, Mohammed Adamu, was there when the Akida Restoration Group visited. His report.
Just when President Muhammadu Buhari submitted a letter to the Senate seeking for an external loan worth over $2 trillion, in Kaduna State the story was different. It was a group of its citizens, known as Akida Restoration Group, that are calling on Senate not to approve a loan worth $350 being sought for by Governor Nasiru El-Rufai. In a petition entitled "Why the $350 million loan request by Kaduna State government must be rejected by the National Assembly," leader of the group, Dr. Tijani Ramalan, stated that the true picture of things is that the management of public funds, which has characterized the advent of this administration, places a heavy moral burden as to the proper utilization of the process of the loan, adding that it is enough fact that today Kaduna State is the second most indebted state in the country, and yet there is nothing to show for these on the ground.
We all know this is a jumbo loan, and we believe it's going to mortgage the future of our beloved Kaduna State by way of taking this $350 million loan. We believe that this jumbo loan will never be deployed in the best interest of the people of Kaduna State because of the antecedents of this government. This is a government that is generally believed in the states of family and friends, and of course business associates. We hereby solemnly urge our distinguished senator, distinguished members of his committee, and the Senate to hasten to the call of the people of Kaduna State by saving us from self-destruction by our government.
The group also said in the petition that they are very much convinced that, given the track record of the administration of Nasiru El-Rufai, the process of the loan will not be judiciously and accountably utilized. Those denying the government the facility will be in the best interest of the people of the state and the generation yet unborn. In his response, Senator Shehu Sani assured the group that Senate will follow all due process in dealing with the petition.
Money that should be used for the betterment of the life and the infrastructure development of the state, and that is going to be borrowed, we must do everything with care and caution. These monies will mature and will be paid long after we are gone, 30, 40, 50 years. And there is a need for us to leave behind a legacy to which the future generation will come to our graveyard and pray for us and appreciate the infrastructures we left behind that would justify the debt we left behind.
The group also visited the two senators who expressed their view on the issue at stake. First, it was Senator Danjumala from Kaduna South.
Whatever we mean to do, as long as we're doing it for the benefit of people of Kaduna, that is just all. I asked about this loan. What did they want to do, use the loan for? When you collected this loan, when are you going to redeem it? What was the money used? What was the loan used for? What so far been given to Kaduna State is 3 months, not even 2 months. From January to March of this year, their subvention is about 50 billion.
Senator Suleiman Hunkui explained that only him out of the 3 senators was not officially informed on the proposed loan by Kaduna State government.
A shekara 2017 za a kashe kudin nan, koko 2017 koko cikin shekara 10 ne za a bada kudin nan a kashe su.
From the Senate in Abuja, Muhammad Adamu.
Well, that's all we can take in this edition of the show. Join me next week for more. Very many thanks indeed for watching. I am Umar Kaltungo. Good afternoon.